I remember thinking, I used to ask my mom, in fact, Mom, why don't all the churches come together and make one big church? And then all the people can come and we would have way more room and more money and everybody could help each other. And it was like, well, because we're the only one true religion. And I was like,
Yeah,
but I didn't understand. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. There's just how could that be true?
totally.
And I still feel that way. Like, how can that be true? I don't think it can be. I do not think it can be. I
Yep.
think that no, that is not what was intended. If in fact Jesus walked this earth, I honestly do not believe that that was the intention for us all to build our own little separate churches and go in there and hate on all the other churches. Like,
And
no,
spent a lot of time doing that,
yeah, we
right?
spend
Like,
waste a lot of time and resources doing that,
yep.
building more buildings because we don't agree with what happens in that building.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy, a Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison.
Okay, well, greetings, compadres. All right, we have another author as a guest today, and you know how much I love this. Love, love, love meeting fellow authors who have an authentic story to share. And this one just touched my life so much because, of course, it touches on a lot of the pillars that I discuss here at Eternally Amy. And I'm just thrilled to have Lorinda Boyer here. She has written a memoir. It is called Straight Enough. Okay, Straight Enough. And she tells the true story of how she strove continuously to be virtuous in the eyes of God and to live the life that she believed He intended for her. She married her high school boyfriend at 18 and she had 2 kids by 28. Those of you listeners who are 28, think about that for a minute, okay? And although she created a perfect Christian home for her family, she never felt wholly content in her role as a wife and a mother. A lot of us can identify, Lorinda. Then her life actually intersected with a woman who would ultimately awaken her sexuality and show her true love for the first time. Struggling to come to terms with her sexual identity within the confines of her strict fundamentalist Christian upbringing, Lorinda is pushed into living a double life. One part perfect housewife and mother, the other part sexual addict, and she soon finds herself in the fight for her life. More than a coming out story, this is a coming into story. So coming into an authentic life and herself. And so, Lorinda, welcome, because there is nothing I love more than people who have found their authentic self. And it wasn't an easy journey to get there, was it?
No, and thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I would just love to give you the floor and let you just tell as much or as little of your story as you would like to share, and we'll go from there.
All right, that sounds good. So I am from the Pacific Northwest, most specifically Bellingham, Washington, which just sits right in between Seattle and the Canadian border. It's an awesome city to live in. Bellingham is progressive and fun, and it's just a loving place. I, however, grew up on the outside of Bellingham in the county, which is still very much, even today, because my family still lives there, is not quite as progressive. Sure, there's people sprinkled all throughout, but mostly they adhere to the fundamental Christian upbringing I had as a child. So though I didn't move far from my home, I moving to the city made a huge difference for me just because things were a lot stricter in the county than they were in the city. And I learned things I never would have learned had I not just moved those 20 miles away from home. So my story started when I was really young, and I always knew I wanted to be a writer ever since I was a little kid. But I knew I had a story. I just didn't know how it was going to end. And I maybe was afraid to find out. But in my 30s, my late 30s, I'd been married for 20 years to my high school boyfriend. And he and I kind of came to the end. He had been seeing someone else, someone else's that I didn't know about. And he had lost our house. So he had stopped paying our house payments, unbeknownst to me, and lost our house. So one day I'm at a drive-through getting coffee and I get a text message that says, I lost our house. You should probably come home. And that's kind of how the story started for me. In my mind, that is the day that everything went from perfect to real. I carried my fundamental Christian upbringing, which I see as everyone sees them differently depending on where you grow up or what kind of religion you're in. But for me, it was very much a one way to Jesus, to God through Jesus Christ. You must be saved. You are born evil. You're evil to the core. The only way to be good is to be accepted is to have Jesus in your heart, and you're always going to strive to be better than you are, and you'll never get there. But by the grace of God, somehow you're going to escape hell and get into heaven. And so it's all good in the end. But in the meantime, there's not a lot of lot of help along the way for people who don't believe so clearly or can't accept, I guess, so wholly this idea that there's only one way. The older I got and the more questions I had, the harder time I had, coming to terms with with what I was taught to believe and what I actually felt on the inside. So anyways, that day when my husband lost the house, that was kind of the turning point. And from there, the book really is where that book starts. It talks about my journey through kind of just discovering all that had been pushed down. I like to tell people when they ask well, how did you know? And it's like, well, you can't hide or push down your true self forever. That eventually comes up. And so along the way, my true identity was trying to come out, but I was forcing it back down, trying to conform to how I had been raised. And eventually that was the breaking point when my husband lost the house. He was having an affair. He was going to leave me no matter what. So I thought, now it sounds clear cut, oh, I must have thought, well, I can either go and find myself another Christian man and try to recover what I've lost, or I can be honest with myself. And by this point, I knew in my heart of hearts that I wasn't in love with him in the way I needed to be. Anyways, I really wanted to be with women, one woman in particular. And so that's the path I chose in life. Of course, got a little bumpier from there. But aside from the bumps, there's so much more joy, authentic joy. I really feel as if I woke up after that point, as if my entire life up to that point, I was going through the motions and I was trying very hard to be happy because I knew I should be. But from that point on, I was happy because I could be, because I felt it. I actually felt joy for the first time, I think. And that authenticity spreads to your family, to your children, to whomever's around you. So I believe that in a way, our divorce saved my life. His leaving saved my life. I never would have been the first to leave. I was far too embedded in my beliefs, and which are predominantly fear-based. And I did not think I had the strength on my own to go. So in that way, I'll be eternally grateful to him, because he had the guts to break out of the mold. The way he did it might not have been the best way, but hey, we are where we are now. So there's that.
I love it so much because I love how genuine you are in everything that you've been through to get to this point. It's just very evident and obvious when people have really stepped into the version of themselves that they feel like, oh, this person, this was here all along, right? Yeah. And I just didn't know, it was buried under all of the shoulds, right? I should do this. I should be this person. This is what good Christian girls do, or whatever, narrative was going on inside you. I love seeing people find their true, authentic selves and step into that wholehearted living. And it's just clear that you've done that. And I'm wondering because, okay, so here's my deal. I'm not sure how much you know about me, but I grew up in a Christian evangelical home and very much sounds like a very similar background to yours. And I mean, I was all in. I was all in until I started seeing some cracks in my life that I couldn't explain. And it started with a miscarriage. I had married the Christian guy and all of that, and started with a miscarriage and just some big questions about my faith, right?
Right.
Big questions about like, I'm just not sure about all this. And then it started to turn to even bigger questions like, okay, so, well, if God really loves me and wants the best for me and it's unconditional, why is there such this focus on worship and Bible studies and giving back to God, things that are, quote, acceptable in his sight? And I just started really churning away at some of these really big questions. And I felt as if at that point in time, I wasn't in a safe community or environment where I could really ask those questions without people like putting me on the prayer chain, right? Oh, I'm worried about her. Yeah, yeah. And kind of approached my husband and asked some, of these things in the trust of what we had in our relationship. And he was just like, what? You have to have faith and that's all that is required and blah, 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 which I speak all that language. I understand why he says that, or he did at the time. He's in a different place now. But then to cope with all these big questions, for me, I was like, well, I can't handle all this. And I started drinking socially, normally at first, and turned into this full-blown alcoholic over time, and got sober in 2011. And we're still together. It just kind of happened that he chose to grow with me, which is not the case always, obviously. And some relationships that's not their path. And every day that I wake up and I just say, thank you, God, it's like this totally new experience for me, because it's no longer, it is the God I grew up with, but it is not. And
Right.
it is okay. It is all okay. And I realize now, for me, what a
Yeah.
big deal I made of the whole
Yeah.
thing. Like, I just put all these parameters on God, who God
Right.
was, who God wasn't, what I should do, what I shouldn't do. And so I'm wondering how your relationship with God changed, or maybe you don't have one now anymore, which all is fine.
I like to think that I moved away from being religious and moved more towards a spirituality. I can't accept what I was taught. I don't believe that if in fact there is a God or a higher power, that him, he, her, she, they would ever expect us to, first of all, be miserable. Because really, that's what my religion, I felt, taught, was that you're just kind of miserable all the time. The only time you're ever okay is if you're worshiping and praising God. The rest of the time you're just miserable because you're just trying to get right with God. And I was a little person when my mom taught me that I had to say prayers of forgiveness for things I may have done that I didn't even know about,
Oh,
which
yes.
is terrifying, right? I'm thinking,
Yeah.
oh, great. Just the fact that I'm even alive, I'm sinning and sinning all over the place, and I don't even know what I sinned on, I just can't abide that anymore. So I would say I have rejected organized religion as a whole. I mean, not that I know all the religions of the world, but I think in my heart, I feel that a spirituality is more authentic for me. So
Mhm.
that spirituality to me is that everyone is energy. We're all putting that energy out there. The more
Yep.
positive energy we put out there, the more positive energy we get back. And I really believe that we're just all out here to help each other and to do the very best we can. And
Yep.
that's my spirituality. That's
Yep.
what I live by.
Yep. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that because yeah, it's just so true. It's funny looking back to because I say now that I am definitely on the side of spirituality as opposed to religion. And I just realize, wow, by just simply blowing off the fence line that was surrounding my beliefs, I found this whole new world, right? And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm like, gosh, I sure made it a big deal, but I mean, I don't blame myself. That's how
Right.
we were brought up. And it was, for me, I understand totally that it was well intentioned in my circumstance, but the costume didn't fit after a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that I think that if in fact you want to follow any sort of organized religion, you have to do it if you want it to be successful, if you want it to be patterned after who you think that Jesus or whomever was, it has to evolve with the world. Can you imagine if when Jesus walked the earth, what if nothing changed to observe Jesus walking the earth? What if they stayed in their old religious patterns from before and nothing ever evolved and no one ever wrote the New Testament? And I mean, religion evolves whether you want it to or not, because life evolves. And so for
I,
people who want to stay stuck in that pattern, I can't understand it. It's like if that's what you want, then you should probably go live back in the dark ages, because things are going to keep moving and religion has to evolve if that's something you want as part of your life.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more. You said that so beautifully. And, I think that the misnomer that I personally feel is a misnomer is that by being wedded to some of the past thought patterns and traditions and all of that, it's just doing nothing but a disservice. If I were still actively doing all the church stuff, I just feel like that's not a badge of honor to wear. Like, oh, we're these stalwarts and we never change and all this. I don't think that is anything to be proud of personally.
Neither
You
do
know, and
I.
I hope I don't get to that point where, and I used to believe that too. I used to be in that spot, parked in that
Mhm.
parking space, right? And
Right.
it's like, I hope I don't do that again in my life and close myself off to all the possibilities and the open-mindedness of whatever's out there. I really hope I don't do that again because I just see now how limiting that was for me.
Right. And how much you miss,
Yes.
because so much of my family still lives and breathes what we were raised to believe, and they are missing out on such a huge part of life, a huge part of the world. And I know that they don't think that way. They think that they're being saved, that they're set apart, but that's not living. That's pretending that reality doesn't exist. You can't close yourself into those sort of confines and expect anything good to come from that, because if in fact you really are what you preach to yourself, you preach that you are, then your whole job is to go outside of your little box and spread that love and knowledge and kindness to the whole hurting world out there. And
Yes.
that can't happen if you're not willing to listen or learn or accept things that might not sound exactly the same way that you were taught. My mother and I have repaired our relationship as much as we possibly can. We've come to a point where I know she loves me. She knows I love her. I see her all the time. We do not agree and never will again, probably, on where we stand on God and sexuality, politics. I mean, there's nothing on that side that we even come close to agreeing on. Um, but we both have come to this point where we just are like, okay, well, my love for you matters more to me than these other things. And I wish in the bottom, like to the bottom of my heart, that she could carry that over into the rest of life, that she could see that love she has for me, if in fact there is a God, that's the love he has for everyone.
Right.
That's
Yep.
for everyone. Like, don't put walls around it. Like, God
Yeah.
never said he did. You did. I mean, the
Right.
church did.
Right.
Um, You're missing
Right.
out. You're missing out. Colorful
Yeah.
people are out there and they have so much to offer and you're missing out.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that the freedom for me that I found, and it sounds like I know that you found in your own life, it's like the freedom is, it's just unmatched. It's just such an incredible experience. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. I was going to ask you about your family and how your family kind of reacted to all of this, which I don't want to give too much of the book away or anything. So, whatever you want to say about that is great.
Well, anytime you write something that personal, you just, you're, at least for me, I was living with this kind of constant fear in the background, like, oh, I don't want to say that because I'm going to hurt that one person's feelings, or, I don't want. And then finally, you just have to come to terms with the fact that this is your story. You lived
Right.
it, you breathed it, you experienced it in this way. No one can tell you that it's not your valid story. So if people read it and they don't like it, that's not my responsibility.
Right.
My responsibility is to put it out there as authentically as I possibly can in myself. Like it's
Right.
authentic to me. If you don't like it, then that's okay. Well, I had to do that with my family. I had to think that with my family, and it was very difficult. And I was super worried, but I was impressed by the feedback I got. I had a lot of family members that completely came out of the woodwork to support me, people that I didn't even, I have 56 first cousins just on one side of my
Oh
family.
my word.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So the good thing about that is you can almost always find someone to agree with you. The
Yeah.
bad thing about that is if a lot of people disagree with you, it's a lot of people. But but I was very impressed by how my family rallied around me. My mom never read the book. We had that as an agreement. She didn't want to, and I completely understand. My father, kind of the same thing. My kids, I have two sons. They both read the book. They both gave me their feedback, their blessing. My ex-mother-in-law, whom I love dearly to this day, read it not just once, but twice. And both times she just praised me for my honesty. She just reassured me that she loved me so much. I've maintained a wonderful relationship with her and my father-in-law. You know,
Wow.
people are going to react the way you want, and they're not going to react the way you want. Some people are going to exceed your expectations in the good way, and some people are going to exceed your expectations in a bad way. And you have to just decide that being true to yourself is more important.
Yep. It is so true. And it actually, as you were speaking, it reminded me of that old saying. Let me see if I can get this right. People who mind don't matter. People who matter don't mind. And
Yep.
I found that to be true in my life, is that there just are some people who can't hang. They just
Yep.
can't hang, and it's okay. Like they just need to sort of fall to the, backstage of your life, and it's okay. Or maybe the role that they're now playing in your life is just different, and it's all okay. And I love that you found support and love from your mom, even though I do find it interesting that she hasn't read it and won't read it. And but I also get it. I
Yeah.
get it, because I don't want to see what I don't want to see sometimes, right? Like that's because I love that you mentioned earlier, you mentioned fear. And that, is still something that I work through in my own life, is like I'll have something that makes me afraid bubble up, or I don't want to look in the mirror because I'll know that the reflection back I'm going to have to deal with. And I mean, nowadays it's not quite that intense, but because I'm just like, oh, okay, I need to work on that. Oh, okay, yeah, like that character defect keeps propping up or whatever. But yeah, I think it's tough. I think it's tough for people, and definitely for religious organizations. It's not something that fits in the mold. So,
No. And I think it's pretty terrifying to step outside of that when you so wholly believe. Not only was I raised in that Christian structure, but then I married. My boyfriend and I went to church. We had a Bible study that met at our house. We attended Christian marriage retreats. We put our children in a Christian school. So this is something that it's not just something you believe in, it's your whole life, right?
right.
Like it's all your friends, it's
Yep.
your family, it's your support group. And so to challenge that in any way it's very terrifying to people who, I mean, if that's your whole world structure. And that is another way you find out who your real friends are, right? So when
Right.
my husband left and things started to fall apart, it was as if I had the plague, right? People who used to talk to me all the time, all of a sudden couldn't remember my first name, right? Because that might be catchy. You know, they don't want to catch whatever I got because
Right.
it surely wasn't good. And so that was a real eye opener. But also it's really just that fear. Like if I listen to you and I agree with something you're saying and it doesn't agree with what I believe, that's super terrifying. How am I going to justify that in my mind and in my religion? And so, for people like my mother, that's too big of an ask. She can't, there's no way she can lay my lifestyle against the biblical expectations that she believes in and see anywhere where there's a common ground there.
Mhm.
That's too frightening, that's too
Yeah.
much to ask for her. That's too great a risk.
Yep.
So yeah, I just think that, yeah, the fear thing is real. It's way more real than I think people understand. When I found when I was really kind of trying to pull myself out of all of that, people would say, well, what's the big deal? Just leave, like, it's just a church.
Mm.
But it's not, it's so much more.
Right.
We have this respect and this awe for like the Amish or the Mennonites, or even when we look at like more organized religions like Jehovah's Witnesses, or, and we think, oh, well, yeah, they're like a group. Well, so are fundamentalist Christians. So are certain,
Yep.
Baptist and Lutheran, and they may not get as much airtime, but they are can be just as much of a cult as any of those others. And the hold is strong, and the fear is real.
Could not agree more. I just couldn't agree more. And even within the evangelical Christian community, and I don't mean to say this and bash them. I know that everybody's kind of working their stuff out, right? But it's like, there are very distinct, like I remember a theme from when I was growing up was you can't go to that college because they believe X, Y, and Z. And it was very specific stuff about salvation that, like, back then it was like, oh, yeah, like that's a deal breaker. I can't go there. And I mean,
Yeah.
I literally thought like this,
Yeah,
and it was a
absolutely.
thing. Yeah, it was a thing. And so even seeing kind of the dissension and the differing beliefs and the inacceptance of those who were under the same umbrella,
Absolutely. That
yeah,
was so confusing to me. I remember thinking, I used to ask my mom, in fact, Mom, why don't all the churches come together and make one big church? And then all the people can come and we would have way more room and more money and everybody could help each other. And it was like, well, because we're the only one true religion. And I was like,
yeah,
but I didn't understand. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. There's just how could that be true?
totally.
And I still feel that way. Like, how can that be true? I don't think it can be. I do not think it can be. I
Yep.
think that, no, that is not what was intended. If in fact Jesus walked this earth, I honestly do not believe that that was the intention for us all to build our own little separate churches and go in there and hate on all the other churches. Like,
And
no.
spent a lot of time doing that,
Yeah,
right? Like,
waste a lot of time and resources doing that.
yep.
Building more buildings because we don't agree with what happens in that building.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I went through 4 church splits growing up, and I remember each time just how traumatic that was, because like your friends, some of their parents would go one way and then your parents went the other way, and you're like, oh man. And then then you're like, can I still be friends with her because now her mom goes to that? It's just
I'm laughing because I identify with that so much. And I remember as you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, it's the highway thing. We had this service, a church service. It was called the highway. And it was like a big deal. I mean, this was the service for the quote younger generation. And it became this young versus old thing. And it was, which one is right and which one is, not so right. And
right.
I mean, it was like, looking back, I'm like, gosh, I can't believe how much energy. I mean, we had meetings about this.
Oh,
Was
right.
this okay? And it was like, man. And just thinking about what a misled sort of time that was, and what a bummer that,
Yeah.
we couldn't have demonstrated a more supportive behavior. And for those of us who were kind of just kids, it makes sense, but it's a bummer. And for me, I sort of think about always when I talk about this with somebody is that sense of belonging. And I love that you touched on that, because it's so true. When you are deeply ingrained in something, whether it's a church, a cult, a whatever it is, it's like that is your structure for life. And to not have that, or to perhaps upset the apple cart and have that be a possibility that might no longer be in your life, that community will vanish around you. To not have that connection with other people is a terrifying thought. Like, it's
Absolutely.
terrifying. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so I wonder, because, okay, I'm just thinking about my own circumstance. At the time when I got sober, there was something that you could go to in the church called Celebrate Recovery. Okay, if you
Yeah.
wanted to. Now, I grew up in the 12-step model. When I say grew up, I mean got sober. Okay.
Right.
In the 12-step model, I believe there's a ton of different ways to get sober. I am not a preacher of 12-step programs per se. It's just my experience. So it's just what I know. But Celebrate Recovery was essentially a 12-step program with some Jesus peppered on it.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing as AA, except it was just like a lot more, it
Yep.
had a lot of scripture verses and stuff in there, and prayer circles and whatnot. And I remember thinking at the very time that I actually started getting sober, like, oh, well, maybe I should join Celebrate Recovery and I'll be able to kind of, create a new community there. And I didn't. I just stuck with the 12-step, freebie AA, which was great for me. But for your situation, I mean, take those fears that I experienced and that uncertainty and those unknown factors and amplify it by, I'm not sure, I'm asking, you probably didn't find a Christian, coming out group that could support you. So what was that time period like for you? I mean, you're essentially giving it all up.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So, the I never would have addressed, I don't think, my sexuality the way I did if I hadn't started sleeping with a bunch of men. So, which is a strange thing to say, but my trying to push down my feelings that I had for this woman who was just a few years older than me. I met where I worked. I was just so young still. I didn't even know I was in love with her at first. I was actually trying to convert her to Christianity.
Love it.
But I fell for her. Feelings, continued to evolve. We actually ended up in a relationship, quietly, secretly behind the curtain. And I was in a relationship with her for my off and on for my whole marriage. And somehow I compartmentalized that into a spot where it was just for me. I tried not to let it cross over, right? But eventually we got found out, and it just blew up my life and her life. And I had to make a decision, and I was young. I was still in my 20s. I had to decide whether I was going to be with her or whether I was going to stay put and try to make my marriage work. My husband was like, "What do you want? You're going to stay with me? You're going to go with her?" I had a baby. There was no way, no way I was going to leave. In my mind, I figured, well, my child would get taken away. My marriage will be over. I mean, what's going to happen to me? I'm only telling you this part of the story just because I want you to see that I could have lived without ever, I think I could have hidden that part of my life possibly forever, because that's just how I had become. I had just become so secretive with that part, and except that it came out into the open the way it did, and I was forced then to admit to the fact that I had these feelings for this woman. So I put myself into a recovery group, quote unquote Christian recovery group, in my church. My church had a thing, it was called Living Waters. It was actually a branch off of another program that came out of California, this gay man who claims to not be gay anymore, which, you know, if you watch the Exodus thing,
Oh yeah.
you know, it's not true. So it was one of those programs. So I put myself in the program. It was a 9-month program. The whole idea was to be reborn, blah, blah, blah. So I go in there. It's not working out. You know, I'm praying and I'm getting prayed on, and I'm doing we have to break bricks. We have to do a lot of symbolic stuff to kind of bring ourselves, you know, back to wholeness. And it's not happening. I'm getting super frustrated and angry, and I'm not, my expectation is that my prayers and the prayers of those around me are going to change how I feel on the inside, so that I am going to want to have sex with my husband, and I'm going to love him the way I should, because God can do anything. And I'm asking for this help. I'm desperate for it. I'm begging for it. I want it. It's not happening after the first year I'm in Living Waters. And I get really ticked off, and I have an affair, but it's a one-night stand sort of thing, because I'm ticked off. And for some reason, that's how I decided to take it out. So I joined Living Waters for a second year. That's another 9-month commitment. And I'm praying away the gay, man. I am just praying. It's not working.
Camp, take 2.
Right. I end up having more one-night stands, getting more angry. In the meantime, you know, I'm not seeing this woman that I had fallen in love with, because, you know, our relationship got blown up when we got found out, and she actually moved away. Smart woman. So year 2 doesn't work out. Year 3, I am so desperate. Like, I am ready to just end it all. And I think, okay, one last time. And I get pulled aside by the leaders of the group, and they say to me, my 3rd year there, you know, people don't usually take this for 3 years, you know, maybe, you know, what should we, you know, let's look at this a little closer. And so this is the first time I actually come clean with them about this woman that I love, blah, blah, blah. Up until this point, I had just been telling them, yeah, you know, I just don't have these feelings, and, like, you know, but I didn't really admit to having feelings for a woman. It just sounded more like I was just kind of not into having sex with my husband, that I was kind of flippant about the way I behaved around other men. So I think they didn't really see that part of it. So I came clean with them. I thought, what else do I have to lose, right? Except from, you know, everything, but I need to just come out with this, right? They told me that night, after they talked with me, that I needed to leave the group, and that I couldn't come back until I promised that I would not contact that woman that I had, you know, loved. And coincidentally, she had just come back into my life. She had just written me a message, and we had just figured out where each other was. I could not talk to her. I could not see her. I couldn't talk to or see any women that I was attracted to. And when I thought that I had that under control, when I could honestly say, then I could come back to group.
Perfect.
And then it hit me like a lightning bolt. I was like, oh my God, they are not going to fix me. This isn't going to fix me. All they want is abstinence. They just want me to abstain from what my heart wants me to, who my heart says I am. They want me to abstain from that, and basically just live in abstinence from that, and then force myself, I guess, to stay in a physical relationship with my husband. Like, there's no magic thing. And I couldn't have been more devastated. That night I got in this big old truck that my husband made me drive, because he liked the nice car, and I'm driving home, and I got really close to just driving off the side of the road. We live not far from this, you know, overlook over the bay. And I thought, you know, I could just drive the truck right off right here, and just, it could be over. Because I thought, what else is there to live for? There's no answer then. Like, you guys just, you lied. You said you said that God could fix it, and he can't.
Okay, so I seriously want to cry right now. That was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry for that experience for you. However, it sounds like that was probably like one of the catalysts that really was like, oh, okay, so now this isn't fixable. Like, this is not this is not a thing where I'm going to be like, oh, I just need to put in another 9 months, and I think that what I heard you saying, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but like when other human beings who are in those positions of like, well, we're going to believe that we can, be the catalyst to make this change, that God can open this channel and change you. It just makes me feel like, gosh, okay, hold on. So basically what they're saying is like the fundamental core of who I really am, who is already there, and you're just trying to, push it away. Like these programs try to just push it away and stifle it. It's like the fundamental core of who I am is not acceptable to God. That's just not, no, like, okay. And that's gotta just be like terrifying and very disappointing, and like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. So I guess I'm going to surrender to this because, I mean, what's on the other side? I don't know, but I can't stay going back to, it's not, I almost said cleansing stream. That's a different program, different Christian program, but going back to living waters again, it's like, this is just like beating my head against the wall, really.
Yeah. But so I was still, but at that point I was still so committed to making it work with my husband. Cause he and I mean, we've been together for, 20 years, almost 20 years. And I thought, I gotta make this work out. Like, so obviously there's something wrong with me. The whole program really wants you to admit that you have some sort of beef with your mom or your dad, or you know what I mean? Like they want to create a problem where there may not be one because they got to have an explanation.
Right.
And I couldn't figure that out. Like I did not have a problem with my mom and dad. I mean, I didn't really, I didn't, and so I couldn't figure it out and they couldn't figure it out. And so basically, I just thought, well, you know what? We're back to where we were before. You're just going to have to be straight enough. You're just going to have to be straight enough, Lorinda. This is all you got. This is your lot in life.
I love it.
Figure it out.
And so what's beautiful is there was nothing wrong with you. There was nothing wrong with you. You were just not in a spot that was going to support who you were. It was the wrong, spot, but it took a while to figure that out, as it would when it's been your core, foundation for all those years, is to be in the church and a part of the church.
Right. And it's not as if, and I don't admit this very often, but it's not as if I don't miss what I had at church. You know what I mean? It's like, it was my family, my friends, my way of life. It was the structure that structured every day of my life, every night of my life. Basically everything I ever did revolved around it. And so when I came to the realization that I was just going to have to suck it up and just, like I say, be straight enough, which is really where the title came from. I still had the feeling in the back of my mind, well, at least I still have my church, right? Like, I mean, there's a few people in this program that are sworn to secrecy that know these things about me, but nobody else does. So I still have everything, When I officially left my church and came out to everyone, that was no longer the case. And it was pretty lonely. I cried a lot. I was so lonely, and I had to build up a whole new family, a whole new system of people. And, it takes time, and nothing really will replace that, I don't think, because I was born and raised, and grew up in it. And I guess I wish that for other people that I don't think that church programs, that church groups, that religion is bad. I think what people do to it is bad.
Yes.
I don't see anything wrong with building up communities like that support people and love people and are there for people in times of need and to celebrate them in times of joy. I don't see anything wrong with that. What's wrong is when you single out things that you don't agree with, and then you know, that's wrong.
Mhm.
That's wrong. I don't think they realize the impact they have on people. And I've been very involved around with things around me with young people now who are coming out, and churches don't realize what they do to people. They don't realize that when you put someone out and tell them that they have to change before they can come back, and they realize that they can't, that is a death sentence.
For sure.
I mean, it's a death sentence.
Yeah. And I think that it's convenient for, straight people in the church to just go, well, this isn't a problem. You're just in sin, or you're in some level of disobedience or whatever. And it's like, well, it must be, yeah, it's easy for you if you're straight to say that about somebody else who isn't. Like, yeah, that's convenient, and it's like, without owning that real burden of, is what I'm saying and preaching accurate? Is this true? And is this helpful to somebody else? Like, I never saw any maybe I'm not right in my belief system. Maybe this structure isn't what it's supposed to be, but we're being spoon fed it. So I guess we should regurgitate, these things that we're saying to people. But you're right. And the damage that it does in the meantime to people, and the wake of it. I mean, I appreciate and I honor that you brought up the suicidal ideations, because it's like, that is so real. And there are so many people who don't make it. And it's extremely dangerous, I think. And of course, I'm passionate about this, but when churches take those stances and, I don't know, we have a saying in my 12-step group that we don't shoot our wounded. So anybody
Right.
who just wants to keep coming back, we're excited. We're freaking pumped, because it means that you're not dead today. Right.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
when you have looked that in the eye, it gets different quickly.
Yeah, it really does. And I think I was raised to believe that you weren't even supposed to go outside your church for help. And
Yep.
fortunately for me, as a young woman, I too had a miscarriage in between my two boys. And I was very depressed. And my doctor sent me to a therapist who was not in the church. I did not go right away, because I knew that I knew that wasn't okay. She was not a Christian. And so I knew that, and I didn't know she wasn't a Christian. I just knew that she wasn't in our network.
Mm.
And so if she wasn't in our Christian network, I probably shouldn't go. Long story short, I eventually went.
Yeah.
I truly believe she saved my life, because I eventually opened up and was able to, say to her, explain to her the things that was happening inside of me, what was happening with my church program. And she very candidly said, have you ever thought that maybe it's not you that's wrong? And I was just like, what? You demon woman. Now we're both going to hell. Great. I was like, I better run.
Oh my gosh.
But I didn't, and I kept going back to her, and she saved my life. She let me come to my own realizations, but kind of prodded me along the way. And eventually I realized, yeah, she was right. This is not how the whole world thinks. I think when you live in in a certain plate, with certain beliefs around you, you think that's how everything is. You don't realize. And that's why my first point when we started was that I moved out of the county and into the city is such a big deal, because it's not far, but the mindset is huge. It's a huge difference. And yeah. And so to see her and to hear her and to learn from her was a blessing. It was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because had I stayed where I was and gone to, church counselors, they would have continually sent me back to the same place. And I would have just been searching and searching and trying and getting more frustrated. And I probably wouldn't have lived, because I really was so desperately unhappy.
Yeah.
just ashamed of myself. I can live with unhappiness. Like as a Christian, I think I was taught that, you're not really, your whole purpose in life is not to be happy. It's just to serve God. So you can serve God and be unhappy and nobody really cares as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? And so I could have just gone along serving, God and being an unhappy, wife and mother, but I was so ashamed of myself and the shame made me hate me. And so I didn't want to be in me. Like I wanted to just peel myself off of me. I just was so disgusted. So the hate for myself was so great that I knew I probably wouldn't have made it. I probably would have just ended my life. As much as I knew that was a sin too, I thought, well, what the heck, man? I'm going to hell anyway. Might as well just speed it up.
Right.
I mean, what's the point here?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, and that's a terrible cloud to be under at all times. It's just like, well, I guess, and this is unacceptable to my community, to God, and so to me, so then I hate myself. So then I don't think I'm worthy, or it's not worth it because I keep failing when
right.
I
I'm not going to be
try.
a good wife. I'm not going to be a good mom. So what's the point?
What's the
You know,
point?
I might as well just be done. Just be
Oh
done.
my word. Lorinda, your story, it's so moving. And I'm so glad that you wrote Straight Enough. And I'm just wondering, can you talk about what the process of writing the book was like? Did you find it healing? Like, was it challenging? Was it both?
It was both for sure. The I joined a group. I had started writing the book early on when my husband first left, and I wasn't really sure where it was going. I just kind of kept almost like a journal, I would say. I came in contact with a group called the Narrative Project. They helped me get figured out. I showed up to one of their meetings. They were talking about how you could turn your life story into a memoir, or your experiences into a memoir, and it just really resonated with me. My therapist had been keeping everything I'd ever written for the entire time she saw me, which was over 20 years, and she gave it back to me. And I spent time going through that and learning how to change, how to transform those words into, a story, into an actual story. The writing of it was painful sometimes. But it's interesting that the longer it goes on and the more times you've read it on the page and people have read it back to you and edited it, you start to take a step away from it, and you can see the narrator as the narrator, not as yourself. And that in itself is a very healing thing, because then I could step back and say, oh, that poor woman, look what she went through. Or I could say, what was she thinking? Like, don't do that. Like I'm almost just like, stop. Because now I don't feel like her anymore. I know that she was me then, but she's not me now. And that part of it is very, very healing. There's always going to be parts of it when you're writing that, you get thrown back into. And I sometimes would just go to bed and curl up and just not write for a few days because I just felt too sad about it, or too whatever. But yeah, I would say that writing it was a huge healing thing. And more than anything, I think I wanted it all down in a place that this meant so much to me, that I had it all down in one place that I could give to my kids, which sounds so strange. Like, why would you want your kids to read that? But I wanted them to know that I was a person, that I was a dynamic, like, human being, and that I love them so much, and I wanted so much for them. And I was just so broken and incapable in so many ways. And I hope in my heart that they will see that everything that happened, through everything that happened, I still love them, and that I kept going. The fact that I kept going and that I kept trying and that I didn't give up. I hope that they take that into their lives and they say, oh, my mom went through this, or my mom did this. And so I can do it too, because I'm part of her. I can do it too. Even when life gets really hard, I can keep going, and that really kept me writing. That kept me going.
Absolutely get it. That is beautiful. And I totally had the same experience writing my memoir. It was like, I want to tell this from my own voice. I don't want somebody else down the road standing around at the church barbecue, like telling somebody else what I went through from their lens and their perspective, right? Like
Right.
I wanted to tell it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you without knowing your boys, they definitely see that strength that you have displayed. Um, and I admire it so much because it's so needed. It is just so needed for us to show our kids, hey, we're human, right? Like I remember when I was recovering from alcoholism, it's like I just wanted to freeze time, go get better and be kind of all put together and then come back and rejoin life and like,
Yep.
guys, hi, I'm all better. And it's like, no, what they needed was what they got, which was they watched me struggle.
Right.
And that was huge. And that was important for them to see. Like to this day, they will say that. They'll just be like, Mom, we know that we can get through anything because we saw you recover. And that's huge. That is such a joy to me. And it's almost like makes it so worth everything that, we go
It
through.
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And first and foremost, it's your kids, right? And then after that, it's like anyone's kids, right? If anyone, any kid, any woman, any man, anyone reads this and says, well, I felt that way or I had that experience, at least they're not alone and they can,
Yeah.
they have something they can, spur them on to keep going. One thing I was thinking about was just that my kids now will never, one thing they'll never have to worry about is telling me who they love.
Right.
And
Huge.
they are very open about their sexuality with me. They talk to me about it. They talk to me about the men and women that come into their lives. They talk about they're just so open with me and
Mhm.
they have no qualms about it, right? And I am in awe of the relationship that we have now, right? I think
Yep.
about when I was their age and younger. I didn't tell my mom and dad anything. I wasn't
No,
going to tell them anything.
you
I mean, the only time they ever
couldn't.
found out anything was like if somebody else's parent was like, "Well, I saw Lorinda with a
Right.
boy," and you're like, "Oh crap." It better be the pastor's son because that's the only one that's acceptable.
That's right.
Yeah, but I love this. I love that it has opened up the communication with my kids for sure.
Yeah.
They are not afraid to tell me anything, and sometimes I wish they were.
Right. Sometimes like, okay, pretend it's not your own child who you gave birth to, right? Like,
Yeah,
okay,
right.
yeah. Oh, that is such a gift. Such a gift. I'm so glad that you have that relationship with them. And I say that as somebody who has very similar relationship with all my guys too. And it's a huge blessing. And just to not be afraid to come and talk to your mom for fear of judgment and for fear of, I mean, that's a huge,
Yeah.
huge gift that you gave them. So fabulous. Okay, so what is new for you? Do you have any future projects on the horizon? Do you know, do you,
Yeah. I spent the whole last year, so all 2023, my goal was to enter as many contests as I could with my writing. So I started to write poems, which I didn't really know how to do. So I just started doing it and I got two of my poems got published in anthologies and a piece I wrote about actually an essay I wrote about a gay pride parade got published in an anthology as well. So and I had
love
other
it.
like minor publications with my poems. So that was fun. I just took a totally different direction and left the whole writing of a book thing behind for a while. But now I'm working on another book, focusing a little more on what happened, just my experiences afterwards. I did get married. I did not marry the woman from the originally in the book, but I
Mhm.
am married to a lovely woman. And together we have three sons. I have two and she has one. And we are living our best life right now. And there was a lot that happened in between my husband leaving and where I am now. And so I'm writing some of those experiences and hoping to get that book out next. Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. Doing lots of running. I love to run. So
That's so great.
yeah.
Okay, so Lorinda, I feel like I have known you for 1,000 years, and it's been one podcast episode. So
I
I
feel the
just
same.
thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your story. And here's the thing, like, you just don't know the impact of you sharing this story. It is huge. It doesn't lose its potency. I want to tell you that because I hear this a lot from people who I encounter just in different aspects of my life where, they just want to know that it can get better on the other side of all of this pain. And, when you take that step of bravery and you just kind of are like, you know what, I'm surrendering to it. I'm just sharing this. You are such a light. And I just want you to know how grateful I am for you coming on, talking about Straight Enough, talking about your story and your experience with the church. And these are just really important stories to tell, Lorinda. And I can't thank you enough for your time today. And I am just inspired by you. And I just wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And I think your podcast is great. And I think it's important. And so I hope you'll just keep at it.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, so everybody who's listening, I know, that was just such a refreshing, deep breath. So thank you so much. Check out Lorinda Lorinda, do you want to tell people where they can find you?
Yes. So lorindaboyer.com is my website, and there's links to the book there, or you can buy the book at any bookstore. I prefer that you go to your local independent bookstore, but you can buy it anywhere. It's also on Kindle, and it's coming out on Audible this next month in February. So
Love it.
yeah.
All right, fantastic. Go buy it, everybody. And remember to be kind, rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time. Take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. You can keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.